There was a seat for everyone except me. I stood in the doorway of the dining room holding a small wrapped gift in both hands. The house smelled like nutmeg, roasted turkey, and cedar. Someone had taken time with the table candles lit name cards in careful cursive crystal glasses catching the soft light. My name wasn't there. At the head of the table sat my older brother Nathan, still broad-shouldered, still wearing that smirk like it was stitched to his face. He was slicing into the glazed turkey like he owned the moment. Maybe he thought he did. Sophie was beside him, my cousin. She wore one of my mother's old scarves, silk pale blue, the one Mom used to save for Christmas Eve services. Sophie sipped from her wine glass like she belonged here, like she'd always belonged. I looked around again. Maybe I missed something. Maybe a chair had been pulled away to make room for the pies. But no, the table was set full complete without me. I turned to my mother, Evelyn. She was arranging mashed potatoes in a dish with pecans, avoiding my eyes. When I opened my mouth to speak, she glanced at the turkey like it had just asked her a question. "I think you forgot my seat," I said, keeping my voice low. Nathan didn't even pause chewing. Without looking up, he said it flat, clean, like it cost him nothing. "It's outside with the dogs." There was a breathless silence. Sophie let out a quiet snort. One of the second cousins shifted in his chair. A fork clicked against porcelain, but no one said a word. No one laughed. No one objected. I stood there, cheeks burning. I wasn't sure what stung more, that he said it, or that everyone else let it stay in the air like a prayer no one would claim. I could have turned. I could have said something loud, made a scene. But instead, I stepped forward, set the small box down in front of Nathan's plate, then leaned in close enough that only he could hear "check under your plate." And I walked out. Didn't wait for anyone to stop me. Didn't look back. Just stepped into the December night and let the cold tell me I was still alive. When I was little, Christmas was my favorite day in the whole world. Back then, the tree stood by the living room window, not some carefully curated photo op, but a slightly lopsided spruce with mismatched ornaments we'd collected over the years. Nathan and I would argue over whose turn it was to hang the glass dove, the one with the chipped wing. Dad would break up the fight by holding it himself and declaring, "This one's for peace, and peace doesn't pick sides." That was our dad, Henry Carter. He smelled like motor oil and pine shavings and always had a grease stain on his shirt, even at Christmas. But when he smiled, the whole room felt steady. He'd ruffle my hair and say, "You've got grit, kid. You're going to outlast all of us." I didn't know what he meant then. I thought he was just being funny. Now I think maybe he saw something even I hadn't. Nathan used to be different too. He and I once built a snow fort so high we couldn't see over it. I slipped on the ice trying to climb it and busted my lip, and he cried harder than I did, brought me inside yelling for Mom, wrapped me in a blanket and said, "You're not allowed to die ever." That version of him, the one who gave me the last piece of fudge and let me sit shotgun when we went to get firewood, I don't know where he went. I don't know when he left. And Mom, she used to sing while cooking. Her voice was soft, barely in tune, but I remember the way she'd hum "O Holy Night" while peeling carrots. Sometimes she'd twirl in her slippers, apron flaring just a bit when she thought no one was looking. I looked. She used to make sure my favorite mug, white with faded poinsettia leaves, was waiting on the table with hot cocoa and too many marshmallows. I didn't see it this year. Didn't expect to, but I still noticed. What happened to that house? What happened to the people who lived in it? Was I the only one who remembered the good parts? Because somewhere along the way, the laughter turned sharp, the warmth cooled, and Nathan started speaking for the family like it was his to interpret. My voice got smaller. My name showed up less until one day it stopped showing up at all. And still I kept showing up, hoping it was just grief, hoping it was just stress, hoping they'd see me. But hope can go blind if you feed it long enough, and I think mine did. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a fight or a slammed door or some dramatic falling out. No one yelled at me to leave. No one said, "You're not family anymore." They just stopped including me. At first, it was subtle. I'd call to check in on Dad. This was back when his memory started slipping, when he'd forget the names of tools or call me that girl on the phone. And Nathan would answer upbeat as ever, "Dad's resting right now. I'll let him know you called." A few days later, I'd try again. "He's in a fog today." Not the best time. Eventually, I stopped hearing Dad's voice altogether. Just updates filtered through Nathan, always wrapped in concern, always protecting someone. Mom started deferring too. I'd ask how she was holding up and she'd say things like, "Nathan's been such a help. He really knows how to handle things. It's just easier when things go through him." At first, I didn't push. I told myself they were tired, that maybe I was being sensitive. I was living in Denver then, working long hours at a graphic design firm. I sent money home every month, paid part of the furnace repair without being asked, booked flights back for every major holiday. Still, I started noticing things. One Christmas, my old stocking was missing from the fireplace mantel. I found it later stuffed in the back of the hallway closet. The framed photo of me and Dad, taken on the day he gave me his old wrench set, vanished from the wall. In its place was a new photo, Nathan and Sophie at the nursery, holding a flat of chrysanthemums like they'd just saved the family cabin. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Then one Sunday, I logged onto social media and saw pictures from what they called an impromptu family dinner. All of them. Around the same table I used to help set laughing toes, touching under the chairs I once sanded down with Dad. No one had called me. No one had even thought to mention it. When I asked Mom about it, she said it was last minute. "You live so far, we figured you wouldn't want the hassle." She didn't hear the way her words landed. Or maybe she did and chose to let them land anyway. From then on, the pattern was clear. Decisions were made without me about Dad's treatment, about the house, about finances. Nathan explained everything after the fact, always with a tone that made it sound like he was doing me a favor. "Didn't want to bother you while you're busy. It's just easier this way." Easier. For whom? I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just confused. Off balance. Like someone had slowly been turning the volume down on my voice until I couldn't hear it myself. They never told me to go. They just stopped saving me a seat. The first time I realized Sophie had moved in, she answered the phone from my mother's kitchen. I could hear the ceramic clink of a spoon against Mom's favorite mug, the one with the robins on it. Sophie laughed at something in the background, Nathan probably, and said, "Hold on, your mom's elbow deep in pie dough." Your mom? That word sat heavy in my chest for days. I asked Evelyn about it a week later, careful not to sound accusatory. "Is Sophie staying with you now, just helping out?" "She's been a godsend. You know how things have been? A godsend." This was the same Sophie who 3 years earlier had borrowed Mom's pearl necklace and claimed she thought it was hers. Who lied about a missing checkbook at Thanksgiving, who once cried on the porch and said, "I don't know why everyone thinks I'm the bad one." And now, here she was, setting the table I used to set. Wearing the scarves Mom used to wrap around her shoulders on snowy mornings, leaving handwritten notes on the fridge, chickens in the oven. Took Mom to PT. At first, I told myself it was practical. They needed someone around, and I hadn't been, not physically anyway. But slowly, Sophie stopped being a helper and became the one who knows where everything is. When I called to ask how Dad's doctor visit went, Sophie was the one who answered. When I sent flowers for Mom's birthday, Sophie texted me a thank you with a photo of Mom holding the bouquet standing beside her. The caption read, "She loved them. Great day." I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't in any picture anymore. I started asking questions. Nathan's answers were vague. "She's just around to help with errands. It's not like she's taking over." But when I visited for Dad's memorial, Sophie greeted guests at the door. She wore a black dress, simple and neat, the same one I'd worn to my aunt's funeral years ago. I recognized the hemline the way it fell just above the knee. I had left it in the closet upstairs. It wasn't hers. She stood by the coffee table pouring cider, telling stories about Dad like she'd known him better than I had. People nodded. They smiled. They believed her. And I just stood there, coat still on, hands cold, watching my place disappear piece by piece. Later that evening, I tried to bring it up to Mom. I didn't want to accuse. I just needed to know where I stood. "She's just trying to help Victoria. You've always been too sensitive about things." That's when I realized it. It wasn't that they forgot me. It was that they'd found someone easier to replace me with. 2 months before Christmas, I drove up to the house without calling ahead. I wasn't planning to go inside. I thought maybe I'd just sit in the driveway, look at the old porch swing, and remind myself of who I used to be when this place still felt like mine. But when I pulled up, the driveway was empty. No sign of Nathan's truck. No Sophie in the window. No motion in the kitchen. I stepped out anyway. My key still worked. The house was quieter than I remembered. No music, no TV. Just the hum of the heater and the faint creak of floorboards that still spoke when no one else would. I found myself drifting toward Dad's study. It was the only room no one had rearranged. Everything else in the house felt slightly off, like it had been staged to look familiar, but something was missing behind the eyes. But his study was untouched. The old recliner still sagged in the middle. His wrench set sat beneath the bookshelf, paint-chipped and rusted. A clock ticked softly by the window, the one with the dusty face and brass hands that always ran 10 minutes slow. And then I saw at the cabinet in the corner dark wood brass handle. I'd seen him open it a dozen times growing up, but I never paid attention to what went inside. I knelt down and pulled. It stuck at first, then gave way, inside a small metal safe. My breath caught. I remembered something suddenly. A long time ago, maybe high school, he'd tucked a tiny key inside his favorite book. Said it was for just in case. I reached up, scanned the shelves. Lonesome Dove by McMurtry worn spine-cracked leather. The key was still there. When the safe clicked open, I didn't know what I expected. Maybe old receipts, maybe nothing. But there it was, an envelope, thick cream paper. My name on the front, written in his hand. I sat down on the floor, knees to my chest, and opened it. Inside, a notarized will dated 2 weeks before he died. Every asset this house, the savings, the land in Colorado Springs, was left to me. Nathan's name wasn't mentioned once, neither was Sophie's. And behind the will, a note folded yellowed slightly at the edges. It said, "Victoria, I see it now. I didn't before, and I'm sorry. You never asked for anything. You just stayed. You protected me when no one else did. This house is yours. You've earned it. Love, Dad." I didn't cry at the funeral. I cried on that floor. Not for the house, but because in the end, someone saw me. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I dressed in dark jeans and a navy coat. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed, "Look at me." I brought a single box wrapped in plain brown paper tied with twine. It was Christmas Eve. The Carter house still had the same string of colored lights blinking unevenly. The wreath on the door was slightly crooked. Someone had replaced the welcome mat. It used to say, "Home is where Dad is." Now it read, "Winter blessings." I knocked once, then let myself in. No one heard me at first. The dining room was already full. Nathan at the head of the table, Sophie to his right, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Mom sat across, smiling in that soft, distant way that used to be reserved for guests. My seat wasn't there again. This time I didn't flinch. I stepped forward, placed the box in the center of the table, and looked directly at Nathan. He blinked. "Victoria, what are you?" I didn't give him the satisfaction of finishing the question. "Check under your plate," I said, voice low but firm. He glanced down, lifted the charger, and found a single key. It was old brass, worn smooth with use. "Dad's safe key." Nathan's eyes flicked up to mine. Confusion first, then a flicker of something else. Nervousness. No, not yet. He didn't know enough to be afraid. Evelyn rose halfway, her smile faltering. "Victoria, this isn't—" "I'm not staying," I said. "Just wanted to drop that off." Sophie reached for the box. "Is it a gift?" I looked at her for the first time all evening. Looked through her, in a way. She flushed hand, retreating. I turned toward the door. No one followed. No one asked me to stay. Not really. Nathan was already lifting the box's lid. Evelyn said, "Wait, what is this?" I was halfway down the front steps when I heard chairs scrape, voices rise. I didn't stop. The night was sharp air cold against my throat. I walked back to my car, sat for a moment in the driver's seat, let the silence settle. Because what they found in that box wasn't wrapped in malice. It was wrapped in truth, the copy of Dad's will, the letter, a small photograph, me and him shoulder to shoulder from the summer I helped him rebuild the deck. Nothing dramatic, just enough. Let them read it in their own voices in their own time. Let them sit at that table full, but with one chair always conspicuously empty. Would they still pretend I was just too sensitive that I imagined it all? And if so, who left that key? They started calling the next morning. First, it was Evelyn. Just a voicemail. "Hi, sweetie. We read what you left. It caught us off guard, that's all. We should talk. I think we all just need to breathe and maybe come together as a family. No apology, just caught off guard." Then, Nathan sent a text. "Can we meet? There's a lot to discuss. I think we all misunderstood each other. Not a word about the will or the letter." Then Sophie messaged me. Just a sad face emoji, nothing else. For a week, I let the messages pile up. They tried new angles, confusion, nostalgia, even guilt. "Your dad wouldn't want this rift, Victoria. We're still your family. Let's not let bitterness ruin the holidays." But bitterness hadn't ruined anything. Erasure had. And the thing is, I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to prove a point. I just didn't want to go back. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just stopped responding. I think that unsettled them more than anything else. One afternoon, Nathan tried showing up at my office unannounced. My assistant sent him away. I never told her to. She just said afterward he didn't look like someone you'd want to see. She was right. A few days later, Mom called again. This time I picked up. Her voice was quiet, fragile. "Victoria, I think we made mistakes, but this family, it's still yours too." I waited a beat, then said I was always there. You just lived easier when I wasn't. She didn't respond, not because she disagreed, but because there was nothing left to say. 3 weeks after Christmas, I mailed one last envelope. No return address. Inside the original photo of Dad and me. The one from the deck rebuilt the one that had been quietly taken down from the hallway wall years ago. I didn't include a note. I didn't need to. A week later, a neighbor sent me a picture. I hadn't asked for it. She just thought I'd want to know. The photo had been rehung. Not inside the Carter house, not over the fireplace or beside the dining table. It was tacked up in the old shed behind the garden Dad's tool shed, the one place no one else ever went. There it was slightly crooked, hanging above the workbench. Just a girl and her father standing side by side, smiling like the world made sense. No caption, no explanation. I stared at the image for a long time, then closed my phone. That house, it may belong to me on paper, but the real inheritance wasn't brick or timber. It was this knowing. I never needed them to admit what they did because the truth already exists, and it doesn't go away when ignored. I still live in Denver, still drink from that poinsettia mug I took back quietly after the memorial. It chips a little more each winter. I let it. Sometimes people ask if I ever reconciled with my family. I tell them I was always part of the story. They just rode around me. And now they don't get to write me out. I never asked to be seen. I just wanted to exist. If you've ever been erased but chose to remain true, just leave a single heart icon. Victoria learns a profound lesson about self-worth and the power of truth over validation. Her family's gradual erasure, excluding her from dinner's decisions and memories, teaches her that belonging isn't earned through persistence or appeasement, but through self-acceptance. Initially, she hopes her presence will restore her place, but their indifference, led by Nathan's cruelty and Evelyn's complicity, reveals that her value doesn't depend on their acknowledgement. Discovering her father's will and note affirms her significance not because of the inheritance, but because it proves someone saw her when she felt invisible. By leaving the will and walking away, Victoria reclaims her agency, choosing silence over confrontation, not out of weakness, but strength. She realizes that truth, her father's recognition, and her own resilience exists independently of others' denial. The rehung photo in the shed symbolizes her enduring place not in their house, but in her own story. Victoria's lesson is that self-worth isn't contingent on others' validation. It's rooted in knowing who you are, even when erased. She stops seeking their approval, finding freedom in existing, authentically carrying her father's love as her true inheritance.
The tradition started when I was 16 and Mom broke her wrist 2 days before Thanksgiving. "Sarah can handle it," she announced from her recliner, prescription painkillers making her drowsy. She's been helping me cook for years. Helping meant peeling potatoes and setting tables. It didn't mean preparing a feast for 23 relatives with zero notice and no guidance. But somehow I managed it, staying up until 3 a.m. the night before, crying over burnt rolls, serving a meal that was edible if not elegant. Sarah did such a wonderful job, everyone praised. You're so lucky to have such a capable daughter. Mom beamed as if she trained me personally. Dad nodded approvingly. Next year we'll let Sarah handle everything. She's clearly got a gift for this. I was exhausted, stressed, and had missed the entire holiday while frantically cooking and serving. But the praise felt good. Being useful felt good. Being needed felt like love. That was 18 years ago. Every Thanksgiving since, I've been the designated chef for our massive family gathering. What started as emergency help became permanent expectation. The guest list grew from 23 to 30 plus as cousins married and had children, but my role remained the same. Single-handedly prepare a restaurant-quality feast while everyone else enjoyed the holiday. Sarah's Thanksgiving became the family brand. Relatives would rave about Sarah's famous stuffing and Sarah's perfect gravy. They'd request specific dishes and dietary accommodations. They'd bring friends who'd heard about the incredible meal. The pressure to maintain my reputation grew each year. Nobody ever offered to help. Oh, they'd make token gestures. Let me know if you need anything. But disappeared when I actually asked. They'd wander into the kitchen while I worked, sampling food and offering unhelpful commentary, but scatter when I suggested they could chop vegetables or stir something. We don't want to get in your way, became the standard excuse. You're so good at this, we just mess it up. The logistics alone were overwhelming. Shopping for 30 people meant multiple grocery trips with carefully calculated lists. Prep work started days in advance. Making desserts, preparing sides that could be stored, organizing cooking schedules to coordinate oven and stovetop space. Thanksgiving Day itself was a 12-hour marathon of cooking, timing, and serving. While everyone else watched football, played with kids, or relaxed with wine, I was trapped in the kitchen. I missed conversations, football games, and family moments. I ate my meal standing at the counter while cleaning dishes, long after everyone else had finished. The worst part was the criticism disguised as suggestions. The turkey was a little dry last year. Could you make the stuffing less salty this time? Aunt Marie's rolls were better, but yours are fine. They treated me like hired catering staff, not a family member who was sacrificing her entire holiday for their comfort. By my mid-20s, the physical demands were crushing. Cooking for 30 people requires professional-level stamina and organization. I'd collapse into bed Thanksgiving night, exhausted and resentful, while everyone else had enjoyed a relaxing holiday. Friends would invite me to their Thanksgiving celebrations, but I always had to decline. I can't, I'm cooking for my family. They looked puzzled. Can't someone else cook? Or everyone bring something? I'd never considered these options because my family had made it clear. Thanksgiving was my responsibility. Suggesting changes was met with horror. But it won't be the same. You're so much better at it than anyone else. It's tradition. The tradition that mattered to them was receiving a perfect meal without effort. My tradition of working while they relaxed was apparently sacred. College provided temporary relief. I had legitimate excuses to miss some Thanksgivings. But even then, family members would call asking for recipes, complaining that Thanksgiving wasn't the same without Sarah's cooking. The guilt trips were intense. I was made to feel like I was abandoning family by pursuing my education. After graduation, there was no escape. I was back to full-time Thanksgiving duty, but now with added expectations. You learned so much in college, I'm sure this will be even easier for you now. My career didn't matter. My relationships didn't matter. My own desire to enjoy a holiday didn't matter. What mattered was providing them with the perfect Thanksgiving experience they'd grown accustomed to. The breaking point built slowly over several years. Each Thanksgiving became more demanding as family members treated me less like a relative and more like a personal chef. They'd make special requests, dietary demands, and last-minute changes without considering the extra work involved. 3 years ago, my cousin brought her new boyfriend who was extremely picky about food. She handed me a list of his dislikes and allergies, expecting me to accommodate a complete stranger's preferences. When I suggested he could bring his own food or eat what he could from the available options, she was appalled. Sarah, don't be difficult. It's Thanksgiving. Can't you just make sure there's something he can eat? 2 years ago, my brother's wife decided to go gluten-free and expected me to prepare separate versions of every dish. When I explained that would double my workload, she accused me of being unsupportive of her health journey. Last year was the final straw. Dad handed me a list of 32 people 3 days before Thanksgiving. 8 more than I'd planned for. Some folks are bringing friends, he explained casually. I told them you wouldn't mind. I stood in my kitchen staring at that list, calculating the additional groceries, prep time and stress. I'd have to redo all my planning, buy more food and somehow accommodate 8 extra people with the same oven space and cooking schedule. I do mind, I said quietly. What? I mind. I can't cook for 32 people with 3 days' notice. Dad looked genuinely confused. Sarah, you've always handled whatever we've thrown at you. What's different now? What was different was that I was 34 years old and had spent 18 Thanksgivings working while everyone else celebrated. What was different was that I'd never had a relaxing holiday with my own family. What was different was that I was exhausted from being taken for granted. I need help, I said. Real help. Not people standing around offering to do anything while contributing nothing. Well, you know how it is. Everyone has their own traditions and ways of doing things. It's easier if you just handle it. Easier for whom? Certainly not for me. That Thanksgiving was a disaster. I was overwhelmed, stressed, and resentful. The food was fine, but I snapped at people all day. I cried in the pantry while the turkey rested. I served dinner with red eyes and a fake smile, then locked myself in my room afterward. Multiple family members commented on my attitude problem and suggested I was getting too stressed about cooking. The solution, according to them, wasn't to reduce my workload. It was for me to handle stress better. In January, I started therapy. I needed help processing why I felt so angry and trapped by something I'd supposedly chosen to do. My therapist asked probing questions that revealed uncomfortable truths. Do you enjoy cooking for your family? I used to, years ago, when it was occasional help rather than mandatory labor. Now it felt like an obligation I couldn't escape. What would happen if you said no? They'd be disappointed, angry, and probably guilt me into compliance. Thanksgiving would be ruined, and it would be my fault. What if Thanksgiving was ruined? What would actually happen? People would have to figure out their own meal plans. They'd adapt. Life would continue. What do you want your Thanksgivings to look like? I wanted to enjoy the holiday. I wanted to spend time with family instead of working for them. I wanted to feel like a guest in my own life sometimes. My therapist helped me understand that I'd become trapped in a pattern of people-pleasing that had evolved into exploitation. My family had become accustomed to my sacrifice and now saw it as my natural role rather than a generous gift. We practiced setting boundaries and handling guilt trips. I learned to recognize the difference between helping family and being taken advantage of by family. I developed strategies for maintaining relationships while protecting my own needs. By October, I decided this would be my last Thanksgiving as sole chef. I would cook one final meal, announce my retirement from kitchen duty, and suggest alternatives for future years. But as Thanksgiving approached, the familiar pressure mounted. Dad presented the guest list, 30 people this year, with his usual assumption that I'd handle everything. Mom chimed in with special requests and dietary restrictions. Relatives called with their traditional demands for favorite dishes. The expectation was so absolute, so unquestioned, that I found myself falling back into old patterns. I started planning menus and making shopping lists despite my resolution to quit. The momentum of 18 years was hard to break. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I had an epiphany while standing in the grocery store. I was buying ingredients for a meal I didn't want to cook, for people who wouldn't appreciate the work involved, during a holiday I should be enjoying instead of enduring. I abandoned my cart and went home. That evening I called my best friend from college. Are you doing anything for Thanksgiving? Flying to Portland to visit my sister. Why? Can I come with you? She was surprised but delighted. Of course. But what about your family's big dinner? Aren't you cooking for like 50 people? 30. And no, I'm not cooking for anyone this year. Booking a last-minute flight was expensive, but it felt like buying my freedom. I packed quickly, left my kitchen empty, and prepared for the confrontation that would inevitably come. Wednesday evening, Dad called with final details. Cooking starts at 4 a.m., right? Uncle Bob's bringing his new girlfriend and she's vegetarian, so make sure there are plenty of options for her. Oh, and Cousin Jennifer's kids are all going through picky phases, so maybe some plain pasta as backup. Actually, Dad, I won't be cooking tomorrow. Long pause. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not cooking Thanksgiving dinner. I'm going out of town. Sarah, this isn't funny. 30 people are expecting dinner. Then 30 people need to figure out alternative arrangements. You can't just abandon the family. It's Thanksgiving. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm taking a break from being the unpaid caterer. The conversation escalated quickly. Dad was angry, then panicked, then furious again. He cycled through guilt trips, accusations, and desperate pleas. How could I be so selfish? Didn't I care about family? What were they supposed to do now? I stayed calm, just like my therapist had taught me. You could order catering. You could make it potluck. You could go to a restaurant. You could ask someone else to host. Families across America manage Thanksgiving without having one person do all the work. But you're so good at it. And everyone's counting on you. Everyone's counting on me to sacrifice my holiday for their convenience. That's not fair, and I'm done with it. I hung up before he could respond. My phone immediately started buzzing with calls and texts from other family members who'd been alerted to the crisis. I turned it off. Thursday morning at 3 a.m., instead of starting turkey prep, I was in an Uber heading to the airport. Instead of calculating cooking times and oven schedules, I was buying coffee and settling into my window seat. Instead of sacrificing another holiday to other people's expectations, I was finally putting myself first. The guilt was intense during takeoff. 18 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. I imagined the chaos back home as 30 people arrived expecting a feast and found empty kitchen. Part of me wanted to turn around and fix the situation I'd created. But a bigger part of me felt free for the first time in decades. Portland was beautiful. My friend's sister had a small gathering, just 8 people, where everyone contributed something. I brought wine and helped with cleanup afterward. We played board games, took walks, and actually enjoyed each other's company instead of just consuming food someone else had prepared. It was the most relaxing Thanksgiving I'd had since I was 15. My phone, when I finally turned it back on Friday, contained 47 messages. They ranged from angry to hurt to desperate to manipulative. The story I pieced together was predictably chaotic. The family had gathered Thursday expecting their usual feast. When they realized I wasn't there and no food was prepared, panic ensued. Some people left to find restaurants, most were closed. Others raided my parents' pantry for whatever they could find. A few relatives went to grocery stores and bought pre-made dishes. They ended up with a hodgepodge meal of store-bought turkey, instant mashing potatoes, canned vegetables, and frozen pies. It was, according to multiple messages, a disaster, and the worst Thanksgiving ever. Several family members blamed me for ruining the holiday. Others were hurt that I'd left without warning. A few were angry that I'd abandoned family during a time when we're supposed to be together. But buried among the guilt trips and accusations were a few messages that gave me hope. My cousin Mark, I never realized how much work you put into Thanksgiving. I'm sorry we took you for granted. My Aunt Linda, I understand why you needed a break. We should have helped more over the years. My brother, Mom and Dad are furious, but honestly, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. The most telling response came from my teenage niece. It was actually kind of fun figuring out dinner together. Like a cooking adventure. But Uncle Dave burned the rolls and Grandpa complained the whole time. Over the following weeks, family dynamics slowly shifted. Some relatives remained angry and refused to speak to me. They couldn't forgive me for disrupting their comfortable arrangement. These were people who had valued me only as a service provider, and without that service they had no use for me. Others began to understand what they'd been asking of me all those years. They reached out with apologies and invitations to smaller, more manageable gatherings where cooking duties were shared. My parents took the longest to come around. They felt embarrassed by the Thanksgiving disaster, and blamed me for making them look bad in front of relatives. It took several honest conversations before they could see the situation from my perspective. We never asked you to cook for everyone, Mom protested during one particularly difficult phone call. You didn't have to ask. You expected it and I delivered. For 18 years. But you seemed to enjoy it. I enjoyed feeling useful and appreciated. I didn't enjoy sacrificing every Thanksgiving while everyone else relaxed. We didn't know you felt that way. This was the hardest part to accept, that they genuinely hadn't considered my experience. In their minds, I was fulfilling my natural role as the family caretaker. They'd never questioned whether that role was fair or sustainable because it worked for them. Eventually, we found a new equilibrium. Thanksgiving became a potluck where everyone contributed according to their abilities. Some people brought appetizers, others handled sides, a few managed desserts. The host, rotating annually, provided the turkey and coordination. The meals weren't as elaborate or perfectly coordinated as my solo productions. But they were more enjoyable because everyone participated. People appreciated the food more when they understood the work involved. Children learned to help instead of just consuming. Most importantly, I got to be a family member instead of kitchen staff. I could sit with relatives, watch football, play with kids, and actually enjoy the holiday I'd been working through for nearly 2 decades. 3 years later, our family Thanksgivings are smaller but warmer. Some relatives stopped attending when they couldn't get their perfect free meal, but the people who remained genuinely wanted to spend time together. We focus more on connection and less on consumption. I still cook, but as one contributor among many rather than sole provider. I make dishes I enjoy preparing and eat meals that are still warm. I have conversations during dinner instead of serving it. I participate in my own holiday. The Portland trip became an annual tradition. My friend and I alternate between visiting her family and exploring new cities during Thanksgiving week. It's my reminder that holidays can be about joy and discovery rather than obligation and exhaustion. My family now understands that my presence at their gatherings is a choice, not a given. That makes the time we spend together more meaningful because it's based on mutual enjoyment rather than one-sided service. Looking back, I realized that my Thanksgiving rebellion wasn't about abandoning family. It was about saving it. The old system was unsustainable and unfair. By refusing to continue enabling it, I forced everyone to find a better way. The people who truly cared about me adapted and apologized. The people who only valued my labor revealed their true priorities by cutting contact. Either way, I learned who my real family was. Today, I'm grateful for many things on Thanksgiving. The family members who love me as a person, not a service provider. The confidence to set boundaries even when it's difficult. The freedom to enjoy holidays instead of enduring them. And the knowledge that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to let them take advantage of you. It forces everyone to grow into healthier patterns and more authentic relationships. My kitchen is no longer a prison, and Thanksgiving is no longer a source of dread. That's worth more than any perfectly prepared feast. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my downtown office. Annual Chin Family Reunion, prestigious Willowbrook Country Club, Saturday 2 p.m. The elegant cardstock felt expensive between my fingers as I read the detailed dress code requirements and parking instructions. I hadn't seen most of my extended family in 2 years. Not since grandfather's funeral, where conversations had been brief and focused on arrangements rather than catching up. The location choice surprised me. Willowbrook was known for its exclusivity and steep membership fees. Someone in the family had clearly done well for themselves. Saturday morning, I selected a simple navy dress and pearl earrings. Nothing flashy but appropriate for the venue. The drive to Willowbrook took 45 minutes through winding suburban roads lined with mature oak trees and gated communities. The country club's stone facade and manicured grounds looked exactly as I remembered from the few times I'd visited for business meetings over the past 3 years. My sister Victoria emerged from a silver BMW as I pulled into the parking area. She'd always been the most image-conscious member of our family, and today was no exception. Her designer dress and statement jewelry suggested she'd prepared carefully for this gathering. Her husband Mark followed, adjusting his tie and checking his watch. "Sarah," Victoria called out, her voice carrying that particular tone I remembered from childhood, friendly on the surface but with an undercurrent of evaluation. "I wasn't sure you'd make it. This place can be a bit overwhelming for people who aren't used to it." I hugged her warmly. "It's lovely to see you, Victoria. The venue is beautiful." "Yes, well, Marcus, you remember my brother-in-law Marcus, he's a member here now. His pharmaceutical consulting business has really taken off." She gestured toward the clubhouse entrance where relatives were gathering. He thought it would be nice to have our reunion somewhere special this year. As we walked toward the entrance, Victoria continued her commentary. The membership waiting list is 5 years, and the initiation fee alone is more than most people make in a year. Marcus says it's all about networking at this level. You have to invest in the right social connections to really succeed in business. I nodded politely, holding the heavy glass door open for an elderly couple exiting the clubhouse. The interior was exactly as I remembered it: polished marble floors, oil paintings of pastoral scenes, and the subtle scent of fresh flowers from elaborate arrangements placed throughout the lobby. Our family had claimed a corner of the main dining room, a collection of round tables draped in crisp white linens. I counted roughly 30 relatives, including cousins I hadn't seen since college and their spouses and children. The conversation buzzed with updates about careers, new homes, and recent vacations. Aunt Linda waved me over to her table. "Sarah, dear, how wonderful that you could join us. We were just discussing how impressive this place is. The lunch menu alone must cost more than what I spend on groceries in a month." "It is quite elegant," I agreed, taking the empty seat beside her. Victoria was explaining how Marcus arranged all this through his membership. Such a thoughtful gesture for the family. Aunt Linda leaned closer conspiratorially. "She mentioned you're still working at that same office job downtown. That must be challenging in this economy." Before I could respond, Victoria appeared beside our table. "Sarah, I hope you're comfortable with the menu prices here. I know dining at places like this can be a stretch for some people. Don't worry about it. Marcus has already arranged to cover everything today. We want everyone to feel included." Her words carried the same protective concern I'd heard throughout our childhood whenever she perceived I might be out of my depth. Well-intentioned, but somehow making me feel smaller rather than supported. "That's very generous of Marcus," I replied. "I appreciate the family hospitality." Cousin Robert joined our conversation, settling into the chair across from me with a plate from the buffet. Victoria's right about this place being quite the experience. The membership committee here is incredibly selective. They really screen for the right kind of people: successful professionals, established business owners, that sort of thing. "Robert recently made partner at his law firm," Victoria explained proudly. "He's been thinking about applying for membership himself once he's established a few more high-profile clients." The conversation continued around themes of success and social positioning. Various relatives shared updates about promotions, business expansions, and real estate investments. I listened attentively, asking questions about their achievements and offering congratulations where appropriate. Uncle James regaled the table with stories from his recent Mediterranean cruise, complete with photographs on his phone showing the luxury accommodations and exotic ports of call. The concierge level made all the difference. When you're dealing with a certain caliber of establishment, the service quality becomes paramount. "Exactly," Victoria chimed in. "That's why places like Willowbrook maintain such high standards. It's not just about exclusivity, it's about ensuring a certain level of sophistication in the membership." She turned to me with a slightly lowered voice. "Sarah, I hope you don't feel uncomfortable here. I know it's quite different from your usual environment. These kinds of social settings can feel intimidating when you're not familiar with the expectations." "Everyone seems very welcoming," I assured her. "Oh, absolutely. The members here are lovely people. Very accomplished, of course, but not at all pretentious about their success." Victoria glanced around the dining room appreciatively. "Marcus says the networking opportunities alone justify the membership investment. He's already connected with several potential clients just through the golf tournaments and social events." Cousin Margaret approached our table carrying a dessert plate and wearing an expression of mild concern. "Victoria, I was just chatting with the hostess about our reservation, and she seemed confused about something. She kept asking about Chen, and whether our party was connected to some regular member account." Victoria's brow furrowed slightly. "That is odd. Marcus made the reservation under his name, so there shouldn't be any confusion about the billing. Maybe they have another Chin family who are members," I suggested. "It's not an uncommon surname." "True," Margaret agreed, though she seemed quite specific about wanting to speak with someone called Miss Chun about some ownership reports or documentation. Very unusual for a hostess to be discussing business matters during a family event. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of our entrees. The presentation was impeccable, each plate arranged with artistic precision and garnished with microgreens and colorful vegetable purees. The portion sizes were modest but elegant, typical of fine dining establishments. As we ate, the discussion turned to real estate and investment strategies. Several relatives shared stories about property purchases and renovation projects. Uncle David described his recent acquisition of a vacation rental property in the mountains, complete with detailed financial projections and occupancy rate calculations. The key is finding undervalued properties in emerging markets, he explained between bites of his salmon. You have to think long-term and be willing to invest in improvements that will attract premium tenants. Wise advice, Robert nodded. Property investment requires significant capital upfront, but the returns can be substantial if you choose the right locations. Victoria glanced at me thoughtfully. Sarah, have you ever considered real estate investment? I know it requires quite a bit of startup capital, but there are some entry-level opportunities that might be accessible even with a more modest budget. I've looked into various investment options, I replied. The real estate market has some interesting possibilities. You'd probably want to start small, she continued helpfully. Maybe a modest condo or a duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. Nothing too ambitious initially, just something to build equity and learn the basics of property management. Aunt Linda leaned forward with interest. That sounds like practical advice. Real estate can be so complex for people who aren't familiar with the business side of things. All those legal documents and financing arrangements. It helps to have professionals guide you through the process. Absolutely, Victoria agreed. Marcus has been mentoring me on some of the investment terminology. It's quite educational to learn about market analysis and property valuation methods. I had no idea how sophisticated these financial calculations could be. The meal continued with similar exchanges. Family members shared their expertise and offered guidance on various professional and financial topics. The tone remained warm and supportive, though I couldn't shake the feeling that many of the conversations positioned me as someone who might benefit from their more experienced perspectives. During dessert, a distinguished gentleman in a navy blazer approached our corner of the dining room. His posture and confident stride suggested someone accustomed to authority. He scanned the tables briefly before his gaze settled on me. "Excuse me," he said politely, addressing the table in general. "I'm looking for Ms. Chin. The hostess mentioned she might be dining with a family party this afternoon." Victoria looked up with mild confusion. "Oh, you must mean Sarah. She's Miss Chin, but I think there might be some confusion. Our reservation was made under Marcus Whitman's membership account." The gentleman smiled and extended his hand toward me. "Miss Chin, I'm David Morrison, the club manager. I apologize for interrupting your family gathering, but I wanted to personally ensure everything is meeting your expectations today." I shook his hand warmly. "Hello, Mr. Morrison. The service has been excellent, thank you." "Wonderful. I also wanted to mention that your usual private dining room is available if you'd prefer more privacy for your family event. I know you typically reserve it for your quarterly meetings, but it's free this afternoon if you'd like to relocate." The table fell silent. Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and I could see confusion spreading across the faces of my relatives. "That's very thoughtful," I replied calmly. "We're quite comfortable here in the main dining room today, but I appreciate the offer." "Of course. Also, I have those ownership reports you requested last week ready for your review. Should I have them sent to your downtown office, or would you prefer to take them with you today?" The silence at our table became more pronounced. Margaret set down her water glass carefully, and Robert's legal training seemed to kick in as he processed the implications of what he was hearing. "The office would be fine," I said. "Monday morning delivery works well." Mr. Morrison nodded professionally. "Perfect. And thank you again for accommodating the charity golf tournament next month. Having the club owner personally involved in our community outreach initiatives means a great deal to our members and staff." He turned to address the table. "I hope you're all enjoying your afternoon at Willowbrook. Ms. Chin has created something truly special here. We're honored to be part of her vision for combining luxury hospitality with community engagement." After he departed, the silence stretched for nearly a full minute. Victoria stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, surprise mixed with something that might have been embarrassment. "Sarah," she said slowly, Did he just say you own this place? I do, I confirmed simply. I purchased Willowbrook 3 years ago when the previous ownership group was looking to sell. Uncle James blinked several times. You own this entire country club? Yes. The property, the facilities, and the business operations. Margaret leaned back in her chair. But Victoria said you work at an office downtown. I do. I have a property management company downtown. We oversee several hospitality and real estate investments, including Willowbrook. Robert's lawyer instincts engaged. This is a significant operation, Sarah. The real estate value alone must be substantial, not to mention the business revenue from memberships and events. It's been a good investment, I agreed. The club has a strong reputation and loyal membership base. Victoria seemed to be processing multiple thoughts simultaneously. Why didn't you say anything when we were discussing the venue choice? When Marcus was arranging the reservation? You all seemed so pleased with Marcus's generosity in hosting the family here. I didn't want to diminish his thoughtful gesture by making it about my business interests. Aunt Linda found her voice. Sarah, this changes everything we've been discussing today. When you mentioned looking into real estate investment, you were being quite modest about your actual experience level. I prefer to listen and learn from everyone's perspectives, I explained. Family gatherings are about spending time together, not comparing business achievements. The conversation that followed was markedly different from the earlier discussions. Instead of offering advice and guidance, my relatives began asking detailed questions about property management, business operations, and investment strategies. The tone shifted from protective to genuinely curious and respectful. Victoria sat quietly for several minutes before speaking. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your financial situation and your familiarity with places like this. That was presumptuous of me. You were being protective, I replied. That comes from caring about family. Still, I should have asked about your circumstances rather than assuming. When you mentioned your office job, I pictured something completely different from what you actually do. Uncle David leaned forward with interest. I'd love to hear about how you identified Willowbrook as an investment opportunity. The due diligence process for a property this size must have been incredibly complex. It was thorough, I agreed. But the fundamentals were strong: good location, established member base, well-maintained facilities. The previous owners had built something valuable. They just needed to transition to new leadership. Over the next hour, the family gathering transformed into an engaged discussion about business strategy, property development, and hospitality management. My relatives shared their own professional experiences and challenges, and I found myself offering insights and suggestions based on my work with various property types and business models. Marcus arrived from the golf course during dessert, surprised to find the conversation so focused on business topics. When Victoria explained the afternoon's revelations, his reaction was gracious and enthusiastic. Sarah, this is incredible. I had no idea you were in hospitality management, much less that you owned Willowbrook. I've been bragging to my colleagues about discovering this gem of a club, and it turns out it's been in the family all along. I'm glad you've enjoyed being a member here, I said. Mr. Morrison mentioned you've been active in several of the club's community initiatives. The charity golf tournaments have been fantastic, and the networking opportunities have been valuable for my consulting practice. He paused thoughtfully. I have to ask, when I made the reservation for today, did you know about it in advance? I review all private event bookings, I confirmed. But I wanted you to feel ownership of the family gathering. Your initiative to bring everyone together was meaningful regardless of the venue. As the afternoon concluded, several relatives expressed interest in learning more about my business operations. Cousin Robert mentioned potential legal needs for property acquisitions, while Uncle David suggested collaboration opportunities between our respective real estate investments. Victoria approached me as we prepared to leave. Sarah, I feel terrible about my comments earlier. I was so focused on trying to help you feel comfortable that I completely missed the fact that you were probably more familiar with this environment than any of us. Your intentions were kind, I assured her. Family support comes in many forms. I'd love to take you to lunch sometime, somewhere we can talk properly about your business and catch up on everything I've clearly missed over the past few years. I'd enjoy that very much. As I walked to my car, Mr. Morrison approached one final time. Miss Chen, I hope the family gathering exceeded your expectations. Your relatives seemed quite impressed with the facilities. They did indeed. Thank you for your discretion in handling the situation. I wasn't sure how much to share about my involvement here. Of course, we're always happy to accommodate our owners' preferences, whether that's maintaining privacy or facilitating family connections. The staff understands that different occasions call for different approaches. Driving home through the familiar suburban roads, I reflected on the day's unexpected developments. The family reunion had certainly been memorable, though not for the reasons anyone had anticipated. More importantly, the initial awkwardness had evolved into genuine connection and mutual respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for being so gracious today. I'm proud to have such an accomplished sister, and sorry it took me so long to recognize it. Looking forward to our lunch. The message was followed by several others from various relatives, all expressing similar sentiments and interest in maintaining stronger family connections going forward. What had started as a potentially uncomfortable social obligation had become an opportunity for authentic family bonding based on mutual respect rather than perceived differences in circumstances. Sometimes the most meaningful family moments arise from unexpected revelations and the conversations they inspire.